There's no reason to treat mental illnesses any differently to a physical illness or a physical disability or anything like that.
So I am delighted to be chatting today with a good friend and colleague of mine from work, Stacey. Stacey, welcome to the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
First of all, what are you having to drink with us today?
Well, it's a Friday that we're recording this. No sponsorship here. I've got a Velvet Baileys that I'm drinking today.
I love that you even have the mug that goes with
I know.
And this is kind of like the first crossover, actually, because you also have your own YouTube channel. You blog about what's happening in your life. So would you like to share a bit about who you are, kind of what you do, and a bit more of what you're doing with your channel?
Absolutely. So I'm not an Aussie. I'm originally from England. I've been in Australia about 2 years now, and I have had my blog for a little bit longer than that, maybe about 3 or 4 years. I originally started it as kind of an outlet to raise a bit of awareness about mental health and just to kind of get my thoughts onto paper. And then recently I decided to kind of take that and put it into a YouTube channel and just be a little bit more creative and hopefully reach a few more people in terms of what I want to talk about and who I want to reach. And I have a lot to say, so I feel like talking is always easier than writing it all out.
I guess I do want to preface this episode as well. We are going to have a lot of mental health discussion and sort of our experiences of this. We do recommend that, we, as much as we'd love you to listen to our stories and spark conversations, if it is going to trigger you in some way, maybe just switch it off and come back to a time you're ready and feeling a bit more in the state of mind to do so. Of course, I will put links in the show notes too for Lifeline, Helpline, Beyond Blue. Okay, so I guess to start, do you want to kick us off a bit about your background and around OCD? I know you've done a video about it. Do you want to just, in a nutshell, kind of share your experiences with living with OCD?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think OCD it's naturally one of those mental health conditions that it has a lot of stigma around it. It's very much used as a describing word. There's a lot that people don't necessarily understand about it, and myself included. Like when I first started showing signs of it, I didn't even know that that's what it was. So the more I learned about it, once I'd been diagnosed, it opened up this whole thing for me. My experiences with OCD were I suffered a lot with intrusive thoughts, which is essentially when, everybody has them, but if you don't have OCD, you just pass them off. Like you don't even really realize that you've had them in the first place. So it's things like, if you're walking down the street and you think, oh, what if I walked out into the road or something like that? And, somebody without OCD would be like, oh, I'm not going to do that. But if you have a certain type of OCD, you might think, oh my God, what does that mean? Why am I having thoughts like that? And there's lots of different substrands that can influence those kinds of thoughts. And I guess that what I want to educate people on, it's not all about organizing. It's not about cleaning. It's yes, some types are, don't get me wrong. It is very much a substrand of OCD. Is that contamination OCD or cleanliness, but that's not OCD all encompassing. It's quite a complex anxiety disorder.
And I guess when I first heard your story about it too, it was easy for me to kind of reflect on it and go, but I feel like I've experienced this and that. And I guess you sort of become quick to sort of self-analyze. Do you feel that can be a bit dangerous in that too, or do you think it could be helpful? What's your opinion on?
Yeah, I think that naturally, once you become aware of something, you do kind of start to question yourself. One of the things with OCD is that overanalyzing and that kind of, oh, what if? And I just think it's very important because it's quite a fine line between people being an overthinker and actually,
Yeah.
having it sort of take over every part of your life to the point where you're like, if I have this thought, I have to do this about it, or this is what I have to do to feel better, you know what I mean, to get that thought out of my head.
Yeah, exactly right. So when you were starting to experience these overthinking patterns and encompassed a lot of other things that you were experiencing at the time, how did you know who to speak to, or where was the point you were like, I really need to, and I don't know where to start? Like, what was your experience in trying to seek help?
So I mean, it was really hard because I initially just thought like, well, I'm just like a bad person. The unfortunate thing was that my intrusive thoughts to begin with were surrounding my boyfriend at the time. So I opened up to him initially and was like, oh my God, like this happened. And he was like, I mean, he's an ex-boyfriend for a reason. But he just kind of like flipped his lid and went mad, took it completely the wrong way, and was like, you're this, you're that. And I was like, well, that's that then. I'm the worst person in the world. But then when that relationship broke down, I actually kind of started to think to myself, hang on a minute, like there's something here that's continuing beyond that. In the past, when I was a teenager, I'd already received therapy when I was about 17 for anxiety and depression. So I already kind of knew, right, you can always go back and speak to a professional if you need to. But it was actually quite a few years before I did anything about it. I just kind of was like, oh, easy breezy. Like, I'll be single for a bit. I'll go to Ibiza. I'll live my best life. I'll be fine.
Totally young.
I was absolutely fine. I was 19. We were good. And and I was like, it was great for a little bit. And then I started to realize, this isn't getting any better. And I went back to my doctor because that was just like my first point of call. I was like, I need to speak to someone that has a professional opinion on it. So the first person really was my doctor that I spoke to. And initially she was just kind of like, yeah, it's anxiety, it's depression, which is what I was expecting. And then it was after a couple more appointments where she was like, oh, actually, from what you've been telling me, I think it's OCD. And back home, because we've got the NHS. So the NHS is the National Health Service. So it's just like the free healthcare service in England. And because it's free service, it's backed up. It's very, very busy. There's long wait lists for things. I think I waited, I think I went there in April and then they saw me in November.
Ooh, that's a long time to wait.
It was a long time. And I mean, you can pay and go privately. I knew people that did it that way and you get in like straight away. But, I was like, I wasn't in like a crisis. I mean, in my own head I was. I was like, oh my God. But I was able to, tide myself over. I had like a really supportive family and friends. So I was very lucky in that sense.
Yeah, and that's really important, I guess. Keeping in mind as we have this conversation, not everyone could be so fortunate, but feeling open and ready to have those conversations, I think, is so important. And we're actually, at the time of this recording, we're actually approaching Are You OK Day. And I guess with everything happening right now, this is the best time to have those conversations as well. I guess fast forwarding a little bit now, we're obviously in a very different climate. You are now in Australia.
Yes.
2 years. Was this really ever your plan to stay this long in Australia?
No, not at all. So
please share, like what
So we've got my boyfriend to partly thank for this. So we met, funnily enough, through a wellbeing program in our last job. Our manager at the time partnered us together. We were both going through quite similar things with our mental health. So she was like, oh, okay, I'll partner you together. You can like call each other up. And then it turns out, we got on really well.
You called each other up all right.
We really looked after each other's well-being.
I love it.
And but he was already going traveling, so I was like, oh, it's okay. And then we got to know each other a bit more. I mean, I was in a relationship at the time, so it was strictly well-being buddies. Then that relationship again like started to fizzle, and then me and Lee, my partner, got closer and closer, and then it got to the point where he was like, hey, do you want to come traveling with me? And I was like, yes, get me out of here.
In hindsight, had you known.
I know. We started out in New Zealand. We did a bit of traveling around like Singapore, Bali, landed ourselves in Australia just on a working holiday visa for a year, and then ended up in jobs that we both were really happy with. And we just ended up being like, yep, this is where we want to be for a while now. So we're really lucky. Like, we're on a sponsorship now.
Nice.
And we're hoping to settle for a little bit.
So, I mean, you also have experienced anxiety and depression. Yeah, same here. I guess it'd be interesting to share between us how we knew, what experiences we have, because I guess that's a little more common. As far as mental well-being is, when people are discussing it, they're common things that pop up and very closely linked.
Yeah.
So you said that you went to the doctors and they said that's what you had, giving you all that. Did you already know you were starting to feel quite anxious in yourself, or you had no idea at the time?
I think from about the age of 16, so, like proper like teen age where you've got everything going on. That was when I definitely started to experience very severe kind of mental health issues, in terms of like very dark thoughts, very self-destructive behaviors and things like that. And as I said, that's when I first started to have therapy. That was only very short term. And then I finished school when I was 18 and kind of went off to uni. So everything was all kind of go. I guess when I kind of sat down and started to think about actually what's been going on and how have I been feeling, and you actually sort of compare it, like I'm actually not feeling that different to how I was like 5-6 years ago. I went to this doctor that I didn't usually have. I can't remember why. But she was just basically like, oh, okay, here's some medication, off you go. And I was like, what do you mean? And I was, at the time, I didn't really know anything about antidepressants. So in my mind, I was like, I'm going to take this tablet and I'm not going to have any control over my emotions, and I'm just going to be like this puppet, and ironically anxious about taking the antidepressants for my anxiety. So I was like, I'm just going to not take them. So then I went back again like a few months later, and that's when I had my actual doctor. But it was very consistent from that kind of 16-year-old age where I was experiencing very low moods, finding myself stuck in these like ruts quite often. And I think that just kind of continued. It was kind of going like this, I'd say, throughout that kind of adolescent period into like my early 20s.
My experience from it, I'm pretty confident. Like, I was experiencing it in high school and I just didn't know better. I didn't think about it, but I know that I was going a lot up and down with emotions, and I could feel I was physically tense and everything was agitating me a lot.
Yeah.
When I came out of high school, and I had a couple like dark thoughts here and there, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I just sort of like, puberty, I'm just doing that, And coming out of high school and going into TAFE, and that was when I started realizing like all these changes were starting to happen and I wasn't coping well with it.
Yeah.
So I was still living at home. My folks were pretty quick on it, and they were just seeing counsellors and psychologists themselves for depression and anxiety and that. My dad was just in a new job. My mum has suffered it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, it runs in the family, I guess. And so thankfully I had them very aware of what was going on, making suggestions and calls about it. So this has been going on for like over 10 years, about nearly 15 years. Just trying to do quick math.
How old am I?
Friday afternoon, I'm not. So it's been an interesting journey, I guess, because, as things change, I've started noticing more that I don't cope very well. So very significant life experiences are when I tend to really crumble the most, or something significant has changed. So I only found out in the last year with my doctor and talking to him, he has diagnosed me with adjustment disorder, which I never heard of. Now, I'm no doctor, and I preface I'm no doctor. Some doctors have started saying for people like if with history of anxiety and depression that they may have that correlation of anxiety disorder. And it's based around when there are changes in your life that you're just not feeling in control of, and you have these symptoms that are very closely aligned with both anxiety and depression. And when I would trace it back to things like getting married and moving out of home, having kids, studying something brand new and learning to adjust to those big life changes, starting work. And this year, and I guess with COVID and lockdowns and stuff and trying to adjust back and forth, that was when we found out.
Yeah.
My experience, I guess, is just having the support network. Again, I know how blessed and fortunate I am to have the support in my household, my family, work colleagues and friends. Like, it's been really nice at our workplace when people are made aware of what's going on and have that understanding how sensitive, most people in general are about it.
Yeah.
It helps you to sort of try to carry on as best as you can, as normal as you can. And if you know you're going to have one of those days it's just not happening, it makes it a lot easier to just be a bit more open to go, look, not okay. And usually something will turn around, usually. The anxiety is quite a physical thing for me. I don't know about you.
Definitely like the same. It's always very much to do with my breathing and my chest and my heart rate and all that kind of like tenseness up here. I kind of go into that shutdown. Like some people I know with their anxiety, it can kind of make them kind of come up like this, and it's kind of like go a bit more frantic, whereas mine's just kind of like, I can't cope, I don't know what to do, you know what I mean?
And I know I get obsessive in my thinking as well with just like over analyzing, like, oh my gosh, like I've said something, and it could be something so small that you've said that you start getting anxious about. Has it hurt someone's feelings? Has it offended them in some way? How am I going to have that conversation later on? Oh, it's a bit late. Do I still have that conversation? And then you stew over it so long. So mine's quite an empathetic-y type thing, like in the sense of like I really overthink how someone else is going to feel about something, or how someone might have just said one little thing. And thankfully I've got a lot of people who talk me down and try to
time they probably like haven't even given a second thought to what has been said, but it's that whole thing of like you don't want to come across in the wrong way, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly right. And I guess too, like emotional state of things, like when you feel that low, and like I hate bringing a mood down because I'm having a rough one. It's been nice to have those conversations with doctors, and just they do want to help you. I mean, look, I guess in any profession you may accidentally or unfortunately get someone who may not be so sympathetic.
Yeah.
But you get that in any workplace. It's not just, doctors, nurses. There's so many workplaces where you find that. But I think we're very, very fortunate to have a lot of people who go in the profession because they care and they do want to follow up. They do want to make sure you're, receiving the right sort of help. But as a point of conversation, they're not always going to get it right first go, I guess, until they sort of really realise. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, there's a lot of people that kind of hold off going to see a doctor or a therapist or a counsellor or anything like that because they just think something like, I don't want to cause a fuss, or I'll feel better soon, or anything like that. And I think it's a lot more common than people think to actually go and talk about your mental health. I always kind of compare it to sort of, your brain is an organ. Your brain is just as important as if you had an issue with your stomach or with your heart or with your lungs. Like, if your heart was hurting and you were in agony, you wouldn't just dismiss it and be like, oh, it's fine, I'll be all right in a week. Don't worry about it. Or if you were in excruciating pain and crying over your stomach, you wouldn't just leave it. So I always kind of compare it to that, in that why do we treat our minds so differently just because it's up there? There's no reason to treat mental illnesses any differently to a physical illness or a physical disability or anything like that. Even now, like in today's society, there's that kind of perspective that mental health isn't deemed as urgent or as important as, say, your physical health. Like people just say, oh, I'll be all right. And it's actually, you know, with it being as common, like, you know, they say that 1 in 4 people has or will experience a mental health illness or a mental health disorder in their lifetime, and that's a lot of people that's going to be affected. So I think the more we can open up these conversations and make people comfortable about talking to them and encourage them to go and, you know, talk to professionals or doctors or even friends, then the better it's going to be, and more support we can get behind all of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. What about then, I guess, maybe some advice? I know that we'll be careful about this. What are some advice do you think if someone suspects that something's not okay and maybe either a bit reluctant because they're afraid of opening up to have those conversations because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing or whatever reason, what advice do you think you have for people to approach people? Maybe they might know something's going on.
I think obviously it's a very hard thing to come to terms with. I don't think you necessarily have to put a label on things. I think sometimes just acknowledging that you just need that little bit of support. I would say my first bit of advice is please don't go on Google.
No.
Don't Google anything. Just like I would say the same thing. I say to Lee all the time, if he's got like symptoms of like a cold or something hurts, get off of Google, because it's not going to help you. It could be, you know, absolutely anything, and mental health is so broad. First, spend some time with yourself. I think writing things down is something that really helped me. I did that a lot, especially in the early days. I would type things out and I wouldn't show anyone. I wouldn't read it back. I would just type it out and then it would just be done, just to kind of get how I was feeling out. And then when I was starting to feel comfortable with doing that, I would start to talk to those sort of closest to me. So rather than going straight to a professional, so to speak, it would be like a best friend or someone that I trust. You know, it could be a teacher, it could be a colleague, it could be a friend, a relative, a parent, whatever. Whether you want it to, like I said, be someone professional, someone anonymous, someone from Lifeline, someone that you're close to, just speaking to somebody that you just want to have an open conversation with, not necessarily to get a diagnosis or anything like that, but just taking that first step to say, this is how I've been feeling, or do you ever feel like this? Or, you know, just not making it a big thing, but just kind of having those initial conversations and take the pressure off of yourself. Like I said, it's a very common thing and there's nothing to be ashamed of, but just, you know, it's understandable why people feel a bit hesitant to take those first steps, but there are a lot of people that will listen to you and that will be there to support you, or even, like I said, even to just be there, even if you don't want them to say a word, then there's people there for that too. I just think write things down, journal them, and just make sure you go to people that you're comfortable with, rather than you don't always have to go straight into the deep end and say, I need to get a diagnosis. Like, just take it slow.
100%, I agree. What do you do for your own self-care then? Day's been rough, or you just feel like you're in a good mood and you just want to do something for yourself. What would you do to look after yourself?
I actually started to take up running. It was something that I started doing as like a fundraiser, and then I actually found that it was something that I really enjoyed, and it was something that I was channeling a lot of energy into. It was a way that I was kind of getting that feeling of pushing myself and getting those frustrations or those kind of thoughts and just pushing it out into something. But I do not run 7 days a week, so like, I'm also
I mean, kudos to everyone who does. Like, I know there are a few people who are amazing and they do, that's their thing. They couldn't see myself running for 7 days a week.
No, but then also I'm very into journaling and scrapbooking, and just even if it's stuff that I'm not good at, we're all our worst critics and our worst enemies at times. I'll sit down like I'm gonna make something amazing, and then I start doing it and I'm like, I hate it.
Why did I do that?
Yes. I know that it's good for me, and I really like those journals that are like the prompted ones that I can actually sit down and think about something that I wouldn't usually, and just reading as well. I like a bit of escapism, so reading and just, I think self-care is so important and people don't do it enough. We live in a world where you feel like you always have to be productive, but actually sitting down and doing nothing and, just being, actually there's nothing wrong with that, and we all need to take that time to just mentally reset. I think that's just as important as achieving things, because if you don't, you'll just run yourself into the ground.
Yeah, burnout is so real, and I had my first dose of what that really looked like properly with fresh eyes this year, and it was just scary to think that was finally what it was. All right, to finish, would you like to play a game of Quick Fire 5 with us?
Yes.
Okay, first thing, do you have a favourite Disney movie?
Yes. I do have a favourite Disney movie. It is Tangled. I can quote it. It is the best Disney movie.
It's the best. Glenda's like my favourite. Just those sly comments. Just, oh gosh.
I just love it.
Like, I like Frozen. I do. But I think Tangled is still by far.
I actually have on my bracelet, I was very excited because Pandora brought out like a range of princess charms, and I have a little Rapunzel.
Oh, how did I miss that?
How cute is that? I love her. So she sits on there.
So you have just done a little paint by numbers. What's on paint by numbers at the moment?
My paint by numbers, there is a fox on there at the moment. It's not finished yet. It's a work in progress.
All my things at the moment, until people are willing to take them, like I have them packaged up, but they're starting to accumulate, and I'm actually a little bit nervous where else I can put them. I don't know where they're going to go.
This is a PSA that everyone should be buying your amazing paintings, because they are beautiful.
Thank you. And I picked it up, firstly, as my means of self-care when I had my burnout. And I'm more privy to drawing. Like, that's my first love for art. But I don't know. It was just something that sparked me and went, like, let's do it. Let's give it a go. And I fell in love with it all over again. So from where I started, it's evolved so quickly, and not something I thought I'd ever do. And yet doing, like, landscapes and plants and stuff, like, everyone has actually asked for that, which is actually kind of interesting. How do you start your mornings? Like, what is a little bit of your morning ritual before you step out of the door?
Oh, that's a very good...
I know this is new. I've not asked it, but I'm curious.
That is a very good question. Every morning and every evening, I have a very, like, an 8 to 10 step skincare, like, ritual. Every single morning, like, first thing I do is, like, get up, do all my skincare, and I mean, that's about as exciting as it gets at the minute. Like, especially during lockdown, it's like, get up, wash my face, get dressed, and open my laptop.
Good morning, world. But at least you're keeping up something. Like, that's something small in that routine that you can still keep up. Like, I like that. What was the last movie you watched?
Oh my God, what was the last movie I watched? Blue Valentine. It's so good. It's actually a very small movie. Like a small produced movie. It's got Ryan Gosling in it, but it was like very low budget. And
that's why I've heard of it.
And that was actually the canvas that I got Lee for our anniversary. It was like like a strip with colours for each scene.
Last question. Now, interestingly enough, you've done actually a few different roles and jobs and stuff.
Yes.
Because I know you teach now, if you weren't teaching, what's something that you could picture yourself doing as a career? If it was no option, it was any option, you could do anything. Oh,
I'd be on stage.
Yeah.
I'd be on stage. So my background is obviously in drama and performing, and I love everything about the theatre. It's always just been a big passion of mine to perform. Every time I step into a theatre, it's like, this is where I feel like I belong. And it's always felt like a very comforting place, and learning a part and learning to be a character and things like that, it's always come very naturally to me.
Thank you so much for sharing and being open and honest and having those conversations. So, guys, I'm going to give you all the links possible for Sincerely Stace. It's an amazing platform where she has open conversations, and this is actually going to go on it as well. So this is like a crossover for us, and I'm really excited to share that. So if you feel, again, anything that we've spoken about is speaking clearly to you and you do need to talk to someone, please reach out to any of the Lifeline, Helpline, Beyond Blue, your GP. There's always someone out there who is willing to listen and not judge you for, any fears or wonders that you have about what you're going through. Thank you so much for joining us, Stacey, and I will definitely be in touch later.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Anytime.